Recorded live from the mats of Radical MMA in New York City. Martial Culture Podcast. Your source for in-depth combat sports and martial arts insights with Coach Rene Dreyfus and Matt Peters. Ring the bell and let's get it on.
Multitasking. I did it. Hello. We're back again. Another episode of the Martial Culture Podcast. I don't know what episode we're on.
We are on, I think this is 12 or 13.
Sounds right.
Yeah,
Let's
something like that. We've been doing this for a bit.
How you doing?
I'm doing great.
I'm doing good too.
Yeah.
Back again on Sunday. Back in our normal time slot.
Yes, our normal time slot. That's wonderful. You're not going to hear the end of that, Matt.
I don't expect to. Don't worry about it. So we can't recap a UFC event because it did not happen. The UFC fight night is tonight with Cowboy Cerrone. I put a little spin on that one. Cerrone. That's not how you say it.
And Yancy Medeiros, right?
They're the headliners.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And who else is fighting? You said it was...
we can go down the list, but I'll pronounce their names wrong.
The heavyweight guys or light heavyweight.
It's a small card.
Yeah.
It's tiny guys. Derek Lewis and Marcin Tybura.
Yeah, that's like 205, right?
Yeah, they're big guys.
Yeah.
Francisco Trinaldo, and James Vick.
Yeah, so I look forward to watching tonight, and we'll talk about it the next cast, right? But one thing, I went to see Black Panther last night, which was a fun movie, and funny enough, at a pivotal scene, the guys they're doing jiu-jitsu, so it's kind of happened.
Spoiler alert!
Yeah, no, but they die at the end. No, but it's nice to see. Like John Wick was a movie that was like this. I think the movie that started was Jason Bourne, where they just had a more realistic approach to combat. Obviously, it's still cinema and it's not real fighting, and it's Hollywoodized a little, but that they're actually using real moves rather than the, we were talking about on another podcast, the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, wire work, and a lot of moves that are, frankly, performance art. And it kind of keys into what I want to talk about today. But it's really nice to see that the cinema choreographers are really drawing upon real fighting styles and techniques that are actually work. And that was one reason I enjoyed John Wick. Obviously, it was Hollywoodized, but when you see the actors doing moves you practice every day, it's a nice feeling. And he put in Black Panther was fighting, and there was a triangle choke involved, but not a
Captain
regular
America?
triangle choke.
They were triangle choking Captain America.
No, Captain America's not in this movie. It's just Black Panther.
Right.
It's but I don't want to give any spoilers away. But speaking about Captain America, the Winter Soldier, the pivotal fight with the Winter Soldier was also he was doing jiu-jitsu. He was on the guy's back and he trapped his arm exactly the way BJ Penn used to trap guys' arms in MMA. Sure. And then he was putting on a kind of a choke and they were on the helicarrier or something. But like I said, it's nice to see in the movies a more realistic approach versus the stylistic and cinematic approach that was really popular in the 90s. That was the more, I would say, more drawing from the
Matrix.
That too. But it was even the Matrix. Matrix was like a fantasy world, so you can kind of like I don't know, rationalize it a little bit. But when you're saying, oh, this guy's like an assassin, and they're doing like kung fu wire work that is based out of not even really a martial art tradition, but like Jackie Chan is a Chinese opera tradition, where it is complete performance. It's basically Chinese pro wrestling, and it's fake fighting with the intent of entertainment, not the intent of to show what works or to emphasize what really works. And people think that this didn't have an impact, but I've seen the martial art world. I've been in the martial art world since 1975. And I'll tell you, the karate world was very different in 1970 than it was in, say, 1988. And one of those reasons was, the boom of martial art movies and, the desire for people to do high kicks. And I remember, I people think of me as a grappler, but I used to train karate very seriously. And I remember, people being not happy in the karate school where I was in at that time, because we were a little bit more hard-nosed fighting oriented in the beginning. And they're like, why aren't we learning the jumping, spinning kicks? The things that you would see
stuff, yeah.
the cool stuff, right? The things you see in cinema.
Yeah.
And little by little, you saw the martial arts world change, and particularly, but this was pre UFC, adapt to the market. Because obviously the market demand drives demand, demand drives the product, and so you saw martial arts instructors changing, particularly in the striking arts, obviously changing the way they taught to be much more oriented towards the cinematic moves that are much less effective. I mean, when was the last time you saw a flying sidekick in the UFC? I mean, it's like once in a while, but almost never, and it never really works. Yeah. It never lands. And then a jumping, spinning, 380 kick. It's never happened, right? There's been some jumping, spinning back kicks, but rare. And but they're very rare. What you should be doing and focusing on are your fundamentals, where everybody wants to do flashy stuff. And even in the jiu-jitsu world today, and I'm much more in the jiu-jitsu world, there's an orientation towards flash rather than fundamentals, and that's a big problem. And if you're a teacher that, jiu-jitsu world is still small, and it's reality based in that you're sparring all the time. So people like that, but at the same time, there's always that draw because you have to fight, you have to do what works. But in the karate world, in the taekwondo world, there was an orientation first towards these flashy moves because of the movies. And then what you would see, and you saw this in taekwondo, you saw it in judo, the sport changed the rules to make that happen more, to be more exciting. And I can speak in judo, and it's a real shame that they pile rule upon rule upon rule to improve the chance of high amplitude throws that are much more crowd pleasers. And the desire is to make the martial art more crowd pleasing and, of course, draw more money and fans. Versus, the more ugly, in old judo parlance, techniques of like a double leg or a single leg takedown, which are now illegal. They're illegal in judo. You cannot do wrestling takedowns in judo. You can only play a certain way, and if you don't, you get disqualified. And it's not just performance or they want that. There's other things too. There's an idea of what good judo should be. But really, the Europeans were the ones who pushed this. And they're like, we want to maximize fans, because the more fans we have, the more TV time you have. The more TV time you have, the more money goes into the sport. And then the big wigs in the sport get a little bit richer. Yeah. And I think they're not corrupted. They're looking to grow the sport too, but they're willing to sacrifice functionality for flash. And taekwondo the rule system is like that too, but it's not just taekwondo, it's a lot of arts. And you see the cinema martial arts really detracted from the actual martial world. You're like, oh, well, who cares? The other thing is, you talk to regular people and they're like, well, that's of course she's, my little Judy is a black belt in taekwondo or black belt in karate. And I don't mean to pick on karate or taekwondo. It could be anything, it could be whatever. And then, she's like, oh, she'll kill you with one punch. I'm like, little Judy, who's 105 pounds and, 11 years old. Really? Really? You believe that?
They taught her the death touch?
Yeah, right. They're not educated, obviously. And they're what they see of martial arts is cinematic, and they think that's reality. So, obviously the media culture has a tremendous influence on our perceptions. And until the UFC, most people had no idea. Most people who weren't in fights on a general regular basis, normal people, had no idea what was functional in a fight and what wasn't. And the experiment of mixed martial arts or NHB in the beginning was just mind-blowing. You're like, oh, wow, grappling really works, which nobody thought. The least popular martial art in America before the UFC were the grappling martial arts, were jiu-jitsu and judo. Judo was very, very unpopular in America. They're great practitioners, but in terms of raw population of judo players was nothing. Yeah. Still low. Yeah. And jiu-jitsu is taking over, but what drove jiu-jitsu is, generally it started as the UFC. and thanks to UFC, people are like, oh, this stuff really works. This is I need to know how to wrestle.
Yeah.
I need to grapple.
No
and
kidding.
also, nobody would think of wrestling as a martial art. Man, wrestling's a real martial art.
Put your phone in airplane mode. Sorry.
Okay, so that's my take on that.
Is there a movie that you would say is the best representation of real martial arts fighting? Like a Western movie. Like we could go to the East and find a lot, but is there any Western
No, actually,
movies?
Eastern movies are almost all ridiculously
Really?
terrible. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, most of the movies come out of China, and they come out of that Chinese opera tradition,
Okay.
the wuxia tradition, I think it's called. I don't know the roping.
So
rope
Super
work.
Cop is not a great example.
You know,
Jackie
I've
Chan.
never seen that Jackie Chan movie.
No?
Yeah. But I would say, recently, a more recent movie. Did you see the movie Drive?
Yeah.
There was an
Ryan
elevator
Reynolds.
fight scene. That was like really kind of real, you know, like that was gross and real.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all the fights, I can't think of one right off the bat. I guess Fight Club was pretty good. You know, they was more
Very Backstreet.
Backstreet,
bare-knuckle.
right? Yeah, that was what fights look like, kind of. I think most of the time, the movies that are not action movies, generally that are serious dramas, generally portray violence the correct way. When they're action movies, they go more cinematic and a little more silly.
But Warrior, did you see Warrior?
Yeah, that was good. I saw that. That's a good point. But again, it was an MMA movie,
Yeah,
so
so
of course
have to-
they have to do it right. You know, but there was that MMA movie where the techniques were just terrible. Never Back Down. Yeah, that's it. Right.
didn't see it.
It was terrible. Like it was like you know,
interesting.
terrible.
Well,
And-
the best movie with martial arts in it is obviously Karate Kid. Or no, the next Karate Kid. Sorry, with Jaden Smith. Did you see they're redoing that? Or they're not redoing it. They're making a sequel to Karate Kid. Did you see that?
no.
That's called Cobra Kai.
Oh, right.
It's going to be
Yeah.
a YouTube series.
Oh, it's
It's
gonna-
about
yeah, they're
Cobra
bringing
Kai,
it back,
They're
yeah,
bringing it back,
yeah.
and they got the Ralph Macchio and
And
Or the
the
other
other
guy.
guys. Yeah.
the other guy. So no, obviously, no, Karate Kid is not a great
No,
representation.
it
of
is
karate
not.
or martial arts.
Though I think it tried to be respectful and that was good and tried to show some martial values, you know, and I appreciate that. It wasn't a bad movie per se. And, you know, it's the underdog and has a nice story, but it's, and also the fight scenes in that movie are tournament fight scenes. So
Yeah.
they weren't like,
Well, he won the tournament with
Yeah,
a
right.
kick to the head.
right. But that's it. That's a real kick. That's the
Yeah,
kick
but it's
that,
you can't do kicks to the head. That was one of the rules they had
oh, really? Oh,
when they set up the tournament. There was no head kicks.
well, the other guy, you know, kicked him in the leg or something.
So there was no
Sweep the
rules at
leg.
that point. Yeah. I don't know.
But you know,
got off topic, sorry.
No. So you know, my point is that we live in this mass media culture, and we are bombarded with a lot of media, whether it's video, YouTube, whatever, movies, and before the UFC. We did not have an understanding of what a real fight looked like, and some people thought pro wrestling was real. I mean, you know, when I was a kid, people thought
did
pro
too,
wrestling was
yeah,
real.
I did.
Yeah. Oh, you did?
I did.
I mean, you know, they used to market. I say, I don't know how old you are, Matt, but they used to market pro wrestling as being real. I remember this goes back to 1984, where remember, yeah, I think it was Geraldo Rivera. No, it wasn't Geraldo Rivera. It was another one of those like kind of like slightly
Investigative,
sleazy,
yeah.
investigative, but slightly sleazy. And I forgot his name, but he confronted a pro wrestler and said, you know, what you doing real? And the guy goes, of course it's real, and then smacked him in the head and actually injured him pretty badly. But that, you know, so that at that time in 1984, they were like, you know, trying to make believe it was real. You know, the only reason they stopped saying it was real is for like tax purposes, because when they said it's sports entertainment, they got a big break on taxes. So they said it's not sports, it's sports entertainment. It's entertainment, so we have to pay less taxes.
Yeah. I mean, I always thought it was. I mean, obviously, what they always say now is that it's scripted, but the moves are real to a degree. Like they're actually hitting people open fist and stuff like that. So it's not fighting by any means. It's dancing
Yeah.
with style, and sometimes you make contact with each other.
Yeah.
They're athletes for sure.
They're performers. I don't know if you would consider a Cirque du Soleil performer an athlete, which if you did, that would be great.
I think I definitely would. They're very physically.
I mean, some people, their definition of athlete is very limited, meaning you compete. So in Cirque du Soleil, right, there's no competition. So, but it depends how you define athlete. I mean, if you're just a person who runs down the street for your own personal, enjoyment, are you an athlete? Oh, yeah, I guess.
Maybe instead of athlete, they're athletic.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, and they're all.
If I met The Rock, I wouldn't challenge him to a fight.
They're completely, chemically enhanced too.
Oh, of course, God, they're not sanctioned by anybody. There's no oversight there.
No.
I mean, the amount of ex-wrestlers that die every year from really early, 40 years old, they're dropping dead.
Terrible.
There's no reason besides. Steroids,
but it's funny. I wasn't planning on talking about pro wrestling, but it's kind of funny that we're talking about pro wrestling, and it brings me to exactly what I want to talk about today. And I want to touch on the Olympics because we're watching the Olympics all week, and I was watching with my wife, and we're watching some. Shaun White. Did you see his performance on
not this year?
Oh my God, the kid is amazing, and he does just some amazing things, doing 360s and 480s and 1090s or whatever is in the snowboard, and we're watching figure skating, and I'll be honest, I don't find figure skating. I'm not an enthusiastic fan of it, though I can appreciate them as athletes and performers. I mean, I can really appreciate what they do, like you're saying about pro wrestling, but and I said, I looked at myself and I said, when I see the guy jump. It's an amazing thing. And then when I see them perform, these more graceful ballet-like movements, I look at it and I'm just sort of like, okay. And, I think some people find that entertaining. And it brings me to something about martial arts. Now, you've never studied martial arts seriously, and you've certainly never studied karate. In the karate world, or even in the kung fu world, there's a lot of things called forms. Katas. Are you familiar with those? Where
like this.
Yes, right, exactly. Choreographed movements, a pattern of punch, kick, move around, this.
Yeah.
And they're these choreographed patterns that you memorize and you do in the air. And there's a competition circuit that developed that who can do these best. So that in your karate, in your karate world, there would be the kumite, the fighting side, that competition, which again, it's sport competition, it's point competition. It's not like, the Jean-Claude Van Damme kumite, where
blood sport,
nothing like that. But, and then on the other side would be the kata or the forms, or in Taekwondo, punse, or, whatever you want to call it, where you perform these choreographed movements and the people judge you on your form. And it's just like, ice, 2.5, 2.5, 3.0. Oh, he's the winner. Just like in, ballet or whatever, or ice dancing, or whatever. And, so I grew up in this world, and I was never really interested that much in the forms, but it was something you had to do, and I competed in it. And, one time I'm sitting with one of the older instructors, not instructor, but an older black belt who big on the competition circuit. And we're doing this kata, and he says, you should do a kata like this. In this move, you should do it like this. Whoom. And he's like, and then you just kind of stand there, and you just kind of do the stance like this and this and this. And he's like, tell me everything I should do. And he says, it makes it look much better. And it really, really makes it sharp and good. And I'm like, would that be something you want to do in a real fight? And he said that. He's like, I think probably not. He's like, no, probably you would not. And then I said, well, why are we doing it? He's like, well, it looks good. And I'm like, wait, so what looks good in this format is something you would never want to do in this actual fighting? Well, isn't that ridiculous? Yeah. And we get into an issue of, are you familiar with the term semiotics?
No.
Semiotics is the study of, kind of cultural signifiers and imagery, and I'll read the exact definition here, right? So semiotics is, here we go.
I was thinking symbiotes.
Yeah. Well, that's the same root, right? The study of signs and symbols and their use or interpretation. So, I'll give you an example. Now let's move away from martial arts for a second. And if I do, something in ballet, like, you do this, and this movement has some meaning to you. You can see that you have some cultural background in our Western culture, and if I did this, and I'm reaching my hands up over my head,
doing a pas de bourrée.
Yeah.
I don't know what the
right. And that's kind of a ballet-like movement. We've been brought up to understand that movement as a symbol of graceful dance. Mm-hmm. For example, and let's take it down a notch, like twerking is a meme.
Do you want me to do it?
Can you do it?
No, I can't do it. I just shake.
Hold on, is the video camera on?
No, turn it off.
But this is it's a cultural meme. And let's define the term as meme is a let's get a definition here, official definition of the word meme. So we're an element of culture or system of behavior that may be considered to be passed from one individual to another by non-genetic means.
So it's not just a cat picture?
No, it's no. But
it's a real thing.
It's a meme but it's a picture is a meme, but so are these blocks of information that we associate with our lives. For example, if you see someone twerking, you're like, oh, that's twerking. I understand that is that thing. Yeah. And what is that for? It's a symbol of enjoyment of the movement of dance, and also obviously eroticism, things like that. And we associate that. I think if you were an alien who just popped off on Earth and never grew up, and you're like, oh, somebody's shaking her butt. What does that mean? I don't care. It's like imagine you looking at the mating rituals of marsupials. It means nothing to you.
Hang on. I'm thinking about it. It's weird. I need to get back to this.
Yeah, no, but the mating rituals of marsupials don't. But they have their own memes. Their own, the peacock flame. We have our own these discrete bodies of these ideas. These things are floating around in the ether in our culture. Mm-hmm. These cultural signifiers that we understand. And if you're from another culture, you understand that if I do this, and guys, I'm blowing my body 45 degrees. If in Asian culture, that's a bow, and you understand that as a sign of respect. If you never grew up in an Asian culture, you would not understand that. Why is he leaning over at me? Or what is he doing? And sometimes cultural misunderstanding comes in. So we have these cultural memes, right? Now, how does this apply to martial arts? So let's define what we do in this. Let's take ice dancing, or what I was watching with my wife the other day. And so when you look at it, have you ever watched, this ice skating? Mm-hmm. It's pretty graceful, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think it's graceful?
Because they don't seem to show any effort. They just do things, and it's like
wonderful.
Woof.
Yes, exactly. It's efficient body motion when they do like a 360 and land in perfect balance.
Yeah.
And it's gymnastic or athletic grace. That's number one. And as a guy, it's funny you should point to that point. That's the same point that I look at. When they're doing their twirls, when Shaun White in the snowboard jumps on his snowboard and flips 360 degrees around, you're like, wow, that is athletically graceful.
Give that guy a medal.
Yeah, I mean, that is amazing what he can do with his body. And the efficiency of what he does is unbelievable. You're like, how does that guy maintain his balance, his poise, spin 360 degrees or however many times, and land perfectly on that snowboard and boom, or the ice skate or whatever? How do they do that? That is athletic grace. It has one type of grace, and it has something to do with we understand what efficient body motion is. And we culturally understand it. Now, if I went like this and I did a gorilla dance, that would not be very graceful. Or if I jumped up and down like I'm on crack cocaine, that would not be very graceful. You're like, that is not athletic. That's just crazy person, right? The same. So we understand what athletic grace is, and then at the same time, in the performance arts like ice skating, you have cultural signifiers which signify grace, like lifting your arm up and doing something like this, and I'm doing like some dancing movement, which is not very graceful. Yeah. Like, leave it to your imagination. But they have these that has nothing to do with athletics. It has to do with performance, and it comes out of our cultural understanding of what dance is and what is beauty appealing.
That's interesting because when you talk about like ballet dancing and dancing in general, grace all the way. But then when you talk about river dancing, I'm like, those guys are structured because they don't move their arms.
Right,
like that social signal of grace
because
isn't there.
In river dance is Irish, right?
Yeah.
In that culture, they grew up with that. So they grew up with, this is how we dance.
We keep their hands at their side dance, and they hop around.
We've lost it, but look at the ballroom dancing of like the 16th century where everybody was in tandem and they worked, and it looks ridiculous to us now, where everybody has these like choreographed movements, and how you moved in your group was very important, but we don't have that anymore. Now it's individual dancing because our culture has shifted and it kind of looks ridiculous, or maybe the dancing of ancient Egypt. I don't know. We can't understand it because we're outside of that culture. And this is, studying those things that they do is the semiotics, right? Studying these cultural signifiers. So if I, put my hand up in a certain way, and you see that, and all you people recognize it, means you have a common cultural root, and you are signifying something by that. And so there's grace that is athletic, which is almost objective. Like if you can jump up, do a 360, and land on your feet in perfect balance, any human being can look at that and go, that's pretty cool.
Good job.
Now, if you lift your arm up in a certain dance type movement, people who are ingrained in that culture will understand that to be a certain thing, a performance, a cultural signifier of grace. And that changes, right? Now, what the karate world happened is that when they started having these form competitions, the emphasis was on certain cultural signifiers of martial prowess, not martial prowess, cultural signifiers. And I'm going to do one right here for Matt right now. Okay. I'm going to perform for Matt because I kind of know how to do this because I did it, but I hate it. But I'm going to show you what I mean. And it's called, it's good zanshin in the martial art world. So I'm going to kind of take my mic off and do it.
Right, I'll try to describe what he's doing. And Brianna, can't you do these too? Didn't you take Taekwondo classes? You could do those. Oh, he's breathing, he's moving his. Oh boy. He's getting ready to punch somebody now.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I kind of did you see what I was doing with my eyes? And I kind of pretended to be a tough guy.
In there, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But that's acting. That is acting. That does not mean I am a tough guy. Now, I have a video I would like to show you, but I'll post it, of this little cute, adorable little kid. And she's Japanese. And she is the world, actually, I think it's a world forms champion in a certain style of karate. I think it's a JKA, which is a organization karate. She is a forms champion, and she has all these expressions of that the samurai do. And it makes sense in the Japanese culture. If you ever watch Japanese samurai movies, whenever the guy cuts him down, he goes, and he looks, and he's has this super cool look. And then he flicks his blood off his sword and he puts it back in his thing. And he's all Miyamoto Musashi cool, Yeah. And it's this is a cultural signifier of cool and lethal, but it's not lethal. It's just a signifier of lethal. And these performance arts, these performances became very, very, very important. Very important. And they kind of take over your training. When I was in the 80s, the two arbiters of your skill in martial arts were, this is, you're going to laugh here, right? But depending on the style, so each style was a little different. In Taekwondo, because I did practice with some Taekwondo people, the first thing someone would ask, and this is instead of asking how tough you are or how much you win, it's can you do a full split? So they'd size you up by asking if you could do a full split, because it was a cultural signifier. You're not the man if you can't do a full split.
So Van Damme was the
well,
greatest.
Van Damme was the man. He was the man, right? And that's true. Van Damme was the man. If you couldn't do a full split, you missed that cultural signifier. So everybody in the academy, to be the man, instead of actually trying to practice how to fight, all they would do all day is make sure they could culturally split. And this is even more ridiculous, okay? In my karate world, it became also how you wore your uniform. So you had to it became this weird cult thing. It was like, okay, your upper gi, everybody, you know what the gi is, the pajamas, right? The upper gi would have to be really low, and your belt would be long and a certain amount of worn out. Like, you can't have a new belt. It had to be worn out, and the silk had to show. And your pants would be brought up a little bit because it became understood incorrectly, but that the higher the pants were, the more it was like the ancient Okinawans, right? And then, you'd walk around kind of perform, kind of not trying to be a badass, but trying to be Zen-like, and it was this you'd walk around in this uniform and you're you're acting these cultural signifiers, and they became what you did. And so many martial arts put so much emphasis on not the objective technical grace, like the 360 in the air, although that's part of Taekwondo too, but not fighting. Can I do what is now called tricking? I don't know if you've heard of tricking. It's just basically they took the martial art out of it, and they just say, how can I jump and do a 360 or spinning back kick? Not even, just how many tricks can I do that are basically awesome, like Shaun White type stuff, but a little bit more, like parkour with kicks, right? Yeah. Exactly, right. How can I parkour it, right? It's now called tricking. So they took all the martial art element out, and they just do that spinning backflip stuff, right? And could you do that? Or could you wear these? Could you make these, cultural fashion decisions almost, or mental decisions? You carry yourself in a certain way, and I think we all understand that. In high school, if you were a heavy metal guy, you'd wear this uniform or whatever, and you'd act a certain way. You grow your hair a certain way, and those are all cultural signifiers. And we know it. And we knew, this guy with his hair, the mullet, and the denim jacket likes this kind of music, and he hangs out with these people, and he likes to drink, Budweiser, whatever. But you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
it's like a joke.
Every clique has their own.
Right. And in martial arts, when you don't fight, and we were talking about combatives, last week, and the ridiculousness of combatives, and then the other weeks before we talked to ridiculous of cheap blast people. When you analyze the cultures of the martial arts, you see you can study study the memes of that culture, the organisms, the intellectual organisms of that culture. Meaning, what are the ideas floating around? Well, MMA gets rid of that. It's like, you don't have to perform. You don't have to be even 360. You just have to win. Yeah. And this Fedor was a beautiful example of that. He didn't have the six pack because as a martial artist, a long time, like Billy Blank's, era was like, yeah, right. You had to have that six pack, and you had to look cool, and you had to fly in the air. And if you didn't have a six pack, you weren't in shape. Well, fighting shape has nothing to do with the six pack. There's functional muscles, and then there's, aesthetic muscles. And we confuse the two. The aesthetic muscle became the cultural signifier, not the functional muscle. And Fedor with his pot belly and his little bit of a hunch, and he'd go up and go, I kill you now. Boom. And then they'd all die, right? And the same thing, we were laughing about Roy Nelson, who, is over the hill and all that. But Roy Nelson, you can't deny he had some legit, or Mark Hunt. We were talking about Mark Hunt the other day, and his, the Mark Hunt 2.0, which is Tui Tavasa. That guy does not have a six pack. He does not have even a 2-pack. He's got a beach ball, but he can fight. Yeah. So one of the great things about the MMA revolution is we've dispersed with all that, those cultural memes, all those those weird arbitrary arbiters of martial prowess that had nothing to do with martial prowess. They had to do with performance. And Chinese martial arts is filled with those because they come from the Kung Fu tradition, and I think that for some reason, the katas are very strong, and the kata the kata culture breeds this acting kind of thing. And, we were talking about the wire work of that comes into the movies. That filtered into the movies. And then that filtered into our understanding of what fighting was before the UFC. So we were taken in by Chinese pro wrestling. It was Chinese pro wrestling.
Right.
And again, pro wrestling is filled with the sharpshooter, which is everybody is like, oh, the sharpshooter. Sharpshooter does not work. That's not a real move. Or the, what's the weird one that the guy does? I don't watch. Somebody told me about it, where the guy puts his hand in front of his head and he's like, I can't see you or something.
That's John Cena. I don't know what he does.
Yeah, he does something weird, but it's like
the Boston Crab that comes into MMA every now and then.
That's true. There are some, but that's right. There's some moves that among these memes, right? These that's what techniques are. They're these intellectual organisms that there are some moves from pro wrestling that really work, because pro wrestling's origins are real fighting. And over time, it became more and more cinematic and showy. But the Boston Crab is a legitimate move. If you guys don't know what the Boston Crab is, it's a leg lock where you turn your opponent over on his belly and break his ankle. And it's a leg lock. And though not a high percentage move. You should not be, basing your entire martial art game around the Boston Crab. However,
that's about one move I got, and that's all I'm doing.
But but when people see John Cena, and they know that he puts his hand in front of his face, all his fans know exactly what he's doing, because they've been indoctrinated in this this dialogue of memes. Like, I do this and this is what it is, and it's performance, and it's ridiculous, but to the fans it's not. And we can laugh at that, but at the same time the martial art world was filled with this stuff. And the cinematic world picked that up because it's performance, it looks better on film. Performance looks better on film. Real fighting does not look good on film, generally speaking. You have to cut it down because it looks dirty. It can't see what's going on. Because the objective of movie producers is to tell a story. And if you can't figure out what's going on the screen, there's no story,
you
right?
got two people rolling around on the ground.
Right, yeah. Or just, another guy just, why you don't see it, the guy sticks his thumb in an eye and then you don't even see what happens. Or like, real violence is nasty and brutal and nothing that people really want to see. So of course you're going to move towards that cinematic approach. And that one of the reasons a pro wrestling moved that way is because real wrestling was kind of boring. Real submission wrestling was kind of boring. And it moved into the fake world. MMA had to institute rounds and certain referee stoppages to stop it from being boring. But if people said, okay, no rules, you go in the cage, like, only real hardcore fight fans would probably be interested, because everybody would be like, I don't understand what's going on, and how come they're not punching each other? And what are they doing there? And this is boring. Okay, I'm gonna go watch K1 or something, or whatever, or pro wrestling. So they had to institute these stopgaps to make it less boring, and they interfere with the reality of the fight, but not that much. It's still MMA is still pretty real, but when you have these weird stoppages or stand-ups or you can't do this technique or can't do this, or you're on the ground too long, nothing's happening. There's always something happening in a fight, so you can't say nothing's happening. I mean, nothing interesting to the viewer is happening. The two combatants, something's really happening at every single moment, and they're struggling for their the win. Something is happening. They are not bored. But it's to the fans' perspective, obviously. And
the ratings are going down. Stand them up.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So, you're looking at ice skating. It was interesting to see the difference between the actual objective athletic race, and which is not fighting race necessarily. Athletic race, which is 360s or whatever, but it's still objective. Anybody can look at a guy doing something amazing with his body and appreciate it. And then the performance grace. And performance grace was a part of MMA for so long. But part of martial arts for so long, and MMA got rid of that. Performance was not important anymore. Although it's still, in the traditional world, it's still there. It's still, like I said, that little Japanese kid performing, in the world championship, and she's super adorable. And obviously her parents probably have no desire to have her actually fight. And I'm thinking what she's doing is bad, because if that makes her happy, great. Just don't tell me that she can kick my ass. Because she can't. She can't. She can't. And some people believe that, But the other thing is, what is fighting grace? And we talked about Daniel Cormier and Yoel Romero, right? And the two types of movement. And Daniel Cormier is clunky. Damian Maia too, in striking, they are clunky. They're clunky. They don't have grace in their striking. Yoel Romero does not have technical striking, but he moves, even if it's complete wrong, fast and just explosive, and he moves athletically. Is not technically correct, but he moves incredibly athletically. Daniel Cormier and Damian Maia, who are two fighters I totally respect, their level of technical efficiency in the striking, there's a really trying hard to get good at striking, but they're not. But they're not efficient. They're not graceful. They might be effective here and there. They might get a punch in, especially Daniel Cormier has some athletic attributes that make him a hard puncher. Damian Maia does not. But Daniel Cormier has some attributes. When he puts his hand on your face, it hurts. But you could see that, like we were saying with John Jones, if Daniel Cormier had a striking match with John Jones, 99% of the time, John Jones would beat him. And I firmly believe that. Obviously, like we were talking about before, John Jones didn't come off like a bender or something, right? But because
I knew we would mention him at least once in this episode.
Yes, I know. I did it on purpose for you because you're
thanks,
a fan.
I appreciate it.
You love John Jones.
Go Jones.
Right? Yeah, go.
Go do some coke.
Yeah. Let me just take a drink here. Hold on. But he is trying to absorb that level of gracefulness, that Roy Jones Jr., that Lomachenko. You familiar with Lomachenko?
No.
He is, I believe, the most technical boxer alive today. I love his style. I think he's way better than Mayweather. And his type of boxing would do much better in MMA than Mayweather's. He is just unbelievable. I posted a video of him on the page, and I'm not a fan of boxing in terms of the sport because of the brain damage. But this man, I'll show it to you. If I showed it to someone who never watched martial arts in their life, they're going to look at what Lomachenko does, and they'll be like, well, that's pretty graceful. That's pretty amazing. That's amazing. That what he does there is we as human beings can recognize martial or efficiency. We can recognize athletic efficiency. And if I showed someone a picture of Daniel Cormier throwing a hook, they'd be like, that sucks shit. It hurt.
Cormier sucks.
Yeah, no. I mean, and in wrestling, it's not like that.
Yeah.
Daniel Cormier, when he wrestles, is a monster, but he's so hyper evolved towards wrestling that backing off of wrestling and understanding the efficiencies of striking are hard for him. Which brings me to the point that athletic efficiencies are not always transferable. Like, back in my day, the famous basketball player, Michael Jordan, tried his hand at baseball. And he failed miserably. Now, he is the god of basketball, but his athletic talent was so hyper evolved towards basketball, he couldn't dial it back and reapply it. Or he was maybe older too, but he couldn't reapply it to baseball. Yeah. And so athletic efficiencies are not always transferable. I've had guys come in my academy who are former professional athletes in football, in all different sports. Many baseball. One guy's a former. He was on the AAA for a long time. Almost made it to the big leagues, but he's a great athlete. Can run super fast. Even he's older now. Runs super fast and move and this. And I taught him an armbar, and he struggled just like everyone else. Just like everyone else, right?
It doesn't always translate.
Yeah, it doesn't always translate. And though generally speaking, those athletes, they'll pick up a little faster. Yeah, a little faster, right? But it's still, it's not transferable. But if you wrestled, your understanding of jiu-jitsu, if you open your mind, is generally a little easier. If you did boxing, or we did Muay Thai, your understanding of boxing is a little easier because, they're kind of related. Obviously, if you did kickboxing, your Muay Thai is going to be a little easier. If you did, one mark that's similar to another, they kind of can intermingle. But my point is this, there's a certain level of athletic combat grace that we understand. And really MMA is trying to figure out what that is in the jiu-jitsu world, in the wrestling realm, in the striking, the Muay Thai, the boxing, the shoot boxing realm. What are the most efficient ways to destroy another human being? And when we get to those high levels of efficiency, you can look and you're like, wow, that's beautiful. That's amazing. I'll tell you a story of my mom. My mom hates MMA. She hates that I do MMA. She hates MMA. She just hates it, right? But I had a fight going on, and this was a long time ago, but it was Cal Parisian, who was an amazing judo fighter. I mean, amazing. fighting Diego Sanchez. Remember Diego Sanchez? It's just crazy, right? And it was unbelievable fight of tremendous. Does anybody get a chance to see it? You should see it. Kara Parisian launched Diego into the stratosphere with all these amazing judo throws. My mom just happened to be walking by when I was watching it. And she looks, and she doesn't look away. And she's sitting there, and she's like, wow, that was... She denies it now that she said it, because she denies it, right? But at the time, she's like, wow, that's amazing. And then we have she had this chair, and she's just sitting there watching him. And she watched it for the first time ever. She watched it for about... it wasn't 5 minutes, but it was till the round was over. It was about 4 minutes straight. She was glued, and she was enthralled by Kara Parisian's immense athletic gracefulness. Just like, well, I'm not into ice skating. When I saw this guy, Yuzuru Hanyu, the Japanese guy who just won, you know, I'm sitting there, I'm kind of bored, and then he does this, like, you know, thing in the air, and I'm like, oh my God, that is amazing. Or Shaun White. I've never watched snowboarding in my life. And I watched Shaun White, and I'm like, whoa, that you can do that with your body is absolutely unreal. Unreal. And it's fantastic. And MMA is that. How do we do these amazing efficiencies in each fighting realm? And that's another point that was not always understood by the ancient martial artists. So anyway, I'm going to shut up for a second, and you seem like you have something to say about what I said. So,
putting me on the spot. I wasn't listening. Are you talking?
No, but I want to segue to that other point before I say. But anyway, do you see what I'm saying about MMA? And
yeah,
like, have you ever had an experience where you watched a fighter and you're like, that was just unbelievable?
Definitely. I mean, every time I watch John Jones with the spinning back elbow, like,
yeah, oh my God, his
elbows are insane.
Insane, right? And his timing is just perfect.
Yeah.
Or one of my favorites is TJ Dillashaw now. He's not, Mr. Snake. And he moves in a weird way. He moves unorthodox, but it's not, it's super technical. He's in a position to strike. I mean, he's not perfect. Obviously, Cody Garbrandt has caught him too, and he's lost some fights. But he's in this position, and you think he's over here, and then he's over there. And you think he's over here, and he's over there. Another one is Dominic Cruz, who invented his own unique footwork approach based on, funny enough, dancing.
Oh, dancing.
Breakdancing, because he was a breakdancer, right? So he was studying Muhammad Ali very closely. Then he also had this little breakdancing background, and he kind of like played around with it. So he does very weird things with his feet. And he developed a switcheroo. So switcheroo is like when you switch from orthodox stance to southpaw. You orthodox stance. And he is like, right, one to the other. And he does this shoulder bump. And some of the things he does, I don't think are healthy for his knees. The ones when he goes a little too far. But basically, he created a new style of footwork that was not as appreciated in the martial world as before. Obviously, there were boxers who did this before too. One of them is an old school boxer, Willie Pep. He was known as move a certain way. Excuse me. So it's not like these hadn't been around here, but he put it together in unique ways. And TJ Dillashaw, Cody Garbrandt, all these newer guys are doing that, and just moving around, stances, moving this and this. The kick that John Jones does, the oblique kick, that was a kick that was not understood to be effective until he really started to. Maybe I think another person did it before him, but guess where he gets it from? Just guess. What martial art? Pick a martial art. Any martial art. Whatever you think. The oblique
kickboxing.
Kick. It is not. It is actually from Chinese Kung Fu. The oblique kick is a standard kick from I think it's mostly a Southern style Kung Fu thing, right? But it is actually efficient. It is efficient, and it really works. That really works versus some other moves that are not efficient. And the sport world, whatever sport you're playing, whether it's like we're talking ice skating, whether it's the snowboarding, the things, or whatever. It's a search for the most efficient way to move your body in that context. Meaning, if I need to get down the slalom, the grand
from point A to point
B, I'm going to be the most efficient. I'm going to use my body in the most technical, efficient way I can to win. And this race, or I'm going to do this 360, or to curl. But there's probably some technique to curling too. Something. And you don't see these guys like, they're trying to be efficient. They're trying to be utilitarians, to be as efficient as possible. They're not trying to be performers only. And in some of the sports, the performance element is important, the grace element. But in others, it's not important at all. It's just about getting from the top of the ski slope to the bottom as fast as you can,
right.
and technique and efficiency, which we can appreciate, or getting the instead of the 360, the 480. I mean, the 1080, 1090, however many,
lots of 80s.
Yeah, right, 80s, right? How many spins you can do,
Yeah.
and land in balance.
Right.
Depending on the rules of the sport,
Sure.
you're going to search for that
Within
efficiency.
those guidelines.
Yeah.
I wonder what it says about me that I like watching figure skating when they fall. That's more exciting to me than seeing them succeed.
You know what? I think we're always attracted to drama, and you're like,
True.
how is this guy going to take
I'm
his
also
failure?
jealous. I can't get off the couch
So you're
without
just a
running out of
hater.
breath.
So you're just a hater.
I'm just a hater.
You're just a hater. No, but I was talking about this with someone yesterday, like the Tonya Harding thing. That like people wanted to watch so much more because it was just a train wreck,
Yeah.
and then we wanted to see the drama. So I think people are really.
Yeah, I guess I'm just a human.
Yeah, no, but that's natural. Everybody's like that, They, when there's a car wreck.
I do respect their athleticism, and when they do succeed, I'm happy. But I'm probably happier when they fall on their butt.
Oh, you mean you want to see everybody fall?
Everybody.
You are a jerk. That is terrible. That's terrible.
I don't want to see like my loved ones fall. I don't want to see you fall.
Are you sure about that?
Well, some days. Today we're having a good day.
No, okay, so oh boy. But I'm studying, you look at it from a semiotic standpoint, martial arts was filled with these performance cultural signifiers. And they are just as much garbage as chi blast. As charlatan combatives that we were talking last night.
So learning those katas.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like painting the fence and washing the car. Does that ever translate to fighting? If I just studied katas?
No.
My entire life,
No,
and I got in a fight, I'd get kicked.
No, you get the shit kicked out of you.
Okay.
And that is the absolute truth.
Even if I'm fighting somebody that has no...
No, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, you can't say 100% because life doesn't work like that. You can take aspirin and it won't 100% work, but aspirin works because everything is statistical. We live in a multifactorial society. So maybe that day you ate a big slice of pizza and somehow the pepperoni, offset the aspirin, right? Like whatever. It could be the guy slipped on a banana peel and your, death touch hit him and he died, whatever. Anything's possible. But statistically speaking, kata training will never prepare you in any way, shape, or form. So say it like this. Will cardio kickboxing, do you think cardio kickboxing will ever prepare you for a fight? No.
Well, you would think that knowing the moves, like learning how to kick effectively, or I mean, I guess you're not learning how to kick.
No, you're not. But also,
learning how to kick at all is better than not learning how to kick ever. Like, something's better than nothing.
So this is getting a little off topic, but I'll answer this question. We talked about this before, actually. So some of our listeners will remember this kind of. But if I took you 5 minutes, I could probably teach you a pretty decent jab. Just take it for 5 minutes. Okay, that's about it. So now I want to ask you: in that 5 minutes, will you have a jab as good as Roy Jones Jr.?
Well, me
Absolutely
or
not.
normal people? Oh, okay.
No, anybody in the world.
Yeah, sure.
Nobody. But the jab itself won't be that much different. What is different is his experience with the jab, his timing, his movement, his body shifting, his footwork, his angling, his mental game, his trickery, his everything, his fast twitch, like everything. The jab is not the key. The jab is just a tool, like a gun. Like if you don't practice shooting, the gun is not really that effective. I mean, okay, obviously, you can have a machine gun, but I'm talking like, a regular rifle, right? Like if you don't practice shooting with it, you can't hit anything. The jab is the gun. It's inanimate. You have to learn how to use it. And you have to take time to use it, especially there are different levels of violence. Now, if there's just some dumb 3/4 drunk guy, you could push him and he falls over. That is a very low level of violence. Maybe him getting in your face is a level of violence, but it's extremely low. On the violence scale, 1 to 10, it's a 0.001. Anything could work there. Anything. Now, what about the level 10 where you're getting like, super predator who knows how to be a criminal, and he's did 10 years in Rikers, and he's a street criminal, and he's really, or just some guy who's 270 pounds and really, really, really punches hard and played a whole lot of football his life and just wants to kick the crap out of you. And you're a big guy, but say you're 120 pounds. You're fighting a 270 pound guy, and he's really aggressive and he wants to kick the crap out of you. Those are higher levels of violence. And if you don't have efficiencies, understanding how to use the jab and footwork, that jab means nothing. Nothing. It's not the jab. It's how you use the jab, right? Yeah. So, karate, kickboxing, kata, they're all zero relation to fighting. Now, why do katas exist? Why do they exist? And according to my research, they exist for this reason. Okay, they are not fight oriented at all. They're exercise, and but they're exercise with a purpose. Like let's say it's the 12th century, and Matt's like, oh, okay, here we go again. It's gonna be boring. But let's say it's the 12th century, and you are a Shaolin monk, and let's just do Shaolin monks because they're cooler than like some Okinawan dude.
Sure,
right? You're a Shaolin monk, and I come to your temple. And I'm here
Welcome
ready.
To my temple.
Well, thank you. Will you make me wait outside for 5 days
like
in the rain?
Fight Club? Is that what they do?
No, it was the old. Never mind. It was an old movie. The guy had to wait outside for like 5. It was a Jackie Chan movie.
Well, they did in Fight Club too.
Oh, right. That's right. They did. I guess they did. I don't remember Fight Club that well. But anyway, so I come to your temple. Now, I am a peasant. Let's say. So probably I didn't get enough red meat, or even any red meat. Maybe not even meat at all. I'm probably living on gruel, which is generally the diet of most medieval Asians was medieval Asian peasantry was gruel, and that is proven by research, because what they did is they found corpses and they went into their bones and they went into bone density and they went into their stomachs and found the contents of meals, and they analyzed them, and they said, what did these guys eat before they got killed? And they found that, well, if you're a peasant, most of the time it was gruel, which is like a mixture of rice and barley and a slop, like crappy oatmeal. And that's what they ate, and with some little veggies in a little bit, but not a lot, because actually especially in Japan is not a veggie paradise. They don't have a lot of vegetables. That's why they eat seaweed, because there's not a lot of vegetables. They're mountain vegetables, which they eat in their diet a lot, but they're like basically roots, because they don't have Brussels sprouts and cauliflower and broccoli and spinach. All that stuff doesn't exist in Japan. And honestly, if you're a peasant somewhere in China, probably the same thing. Those roots, or the higher level, higher nutrition value foods were not as available. Depending on where you lived, right? Sure. And so also no medical care. So I probably have worms. I am not eating a lot. I'm probably an average weight of your average peasant, like 112 pounds, 120 pounds. That's what basically, that's according to historical studies. And I come and I say, I'm going to be a fighter. Let's say, obviously, Shaolin monk, so let's put the monk stuff aside. But, let's say I'm a fighter. So what are you going to do? You teach me how to fight, I'll probably, fall over and die. So you have to condition me first. You have to make my body ready to learn how to fight. And that's actually what most of the time we do in our academy, in any martial art academy, is like you kind of get a little bit conditioned first before you go in the deep end of the pool. Your body has to be ready to take the grind. And this is true today. But people are much more resilient because we eat better. Although obviously in America there's a sedentary lifestyle, but generally speaking, we have a lot of protein. Our bone density is larger. We can produce more muscles because we have better nutrition as kids, and so we have medical care. So I am pretty healthy compared to my counterpart in ancient Asia or even Europe. 500, 600, 700 years ago. So but even today, if you walked into my academy, well, what we do is we have to condition you a little bit before we put you in the deep end, because the first time, if I put you in sparring on the first day, you'd strain your back, you'd, probably, pull a muscle in your back, and that would even be light sparring, right? I mean, you felt the choke I put on you and you're like, oh, that sucked.
Took me 4 days to get over.
Yeah, right. Well, imagine if you did a 5-round sparring match against someone who was pretty good.
No, but I took classes and I was hitting the heavy bag. My first day, they just throw me into a heavy bag, and I literally could not open my hand the next day.
Right.
I couldn't open it.
Right, exactly. No, so you see exactly what I'm saying. So what does the Shaolin monk do in the beginning? He's like, okay, do these forms on your own, do this other stuff here, and that'll slowly get you conditioned. And you know what? We'll build in some martial art movement too. But actually, most of the forms, I can speak for the karate tradition, but most of the traditional forms actually emphasize dynamic breathing, which is a very important part of health, dynamic breathing and a little bit of other stuff. So they're actually like learning to breathe with movement, kind of like yoga. So you know how yoga is like, there's always breathe in, breathe out, stretch. That's really the origin of that stuff, where it's fighting, but it's also conditioning your body to move in ways. And there's a bit of also what's also known as dynamic tension, where you're like this, and you really tense up, but it's like kind of like training your muscles in a way to work with the self-imposed resistance. So you're not like damaging yourself with like weights that you can't weight, but you're using a little bit of dynamic tension, dynamic breathing, and you're doing aerobic fitness and conditioning. And okay, 6 months later, I can start teaching you a good diet, some conditioning. Okay, 6 months later, I can start teaching you actually how to do some stuff. But I can't teach you how to do some stuff when you're physically
you die.
You're like crap.
You're on the edge of death. Yeah.
So that is, according in the Japanese traditions, most karate styles had very few katas, and they had their house katas. What happened was when the styles got amalgamated and went to Japan and then to the West, they picked up all these extra styles. And there was a bit of commercialism too, because, you know, you learn a kata, you pay me $50 more. Oh, I teach you another one, you pay me $100 more, and it's a way to make money too. But that's not the only reason. But they were exercise regimens. They were not fighting regimens, and they're not designed to be fighting regimens. They're designed to be like kind of a combination of yoga and a little bit of, you know, cardio kickboxing, ancient cardio kickboxing, right? Or even you could say a little bit of shadow boxing, because there's some reality there, a little bit, but the same reality you would have by, like I said, cardio kickboxing or shadow boxing, that you have to spar with a person to really know how to fight. But that's the origin of those forms. But then as time went on, like I said, they become more performance oriented, and they become an end in and of itself. And, you know, the amount of forms, you know, becomes a badge of honor, and the amount you can kind of make them look really cool becomes a badge of honor. The more acrobatic-y type things you can do, or esoteric things you can do, becomes a badge of honor versus actual fighting combat.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the other thing is, when you're on that performance side, the cultural signifier side, that when we're talking as a semiotics, those signals that say I'm a warrior, or I'm a this, or I'm part of this in-group, when you're on that side, you don't search for efficiency. That's not the MMA world. The MMA world's like, I don't care what you think about me. You're like Conor McGregor. Fuck all you motherfuckers. I'd kick you put a guy in front of me, I'd kick the shit out of him. You know, it's like, remember what he said? I hate Conor McGregor, but it was kind of funny. He's like, you know, for all those guys, it's something. I mean, he looked like he was going to apologize. He goes, and fuck you. He doesn't give a shit about what people think about him, you know? Yeah. And there's so many fighters like that, right? It's about what you did at the end of the day. Did you win or lose? Now, when we're in this ancient world, and there's forms, and that there's no search for the objective of winning at all costs all the time, because not everybody's getting into street fights every day or training in fights every day. They're not. That's not what happened. The objective of Shaolin monks was to be monks first and do a little bit of self-protection later. And also, like we were talking about before, if they were going to fight, they're mostly focused on weapons. So the hand-to-hand was like, okay, we do these weapons first and the hand-to-hand later. So they have a lot of moves that are not efficient. They're just not efficient. And could they work? Like Daniel Cormier, not efficient, but sometimes it works, right? Could they work? Now I'm going to show you a move, and there's a big article, and I'm going to see if I can find it. I read it along. I'm going to show you a move. It's from a traditional kung fu move, and this article talked about this journalist who went to China, and he's an MMA guy, and he looked at this kung fu move, and he trained with him, and he was surprised that the kung fu move did work on him. And he asked the kung fu master, now hold on, let me show you the move, okay, before I do it. Okay, so it looks like this.
Pulling a rabbit out of a hat or something.
Yeah, and it has a weird arm twist to it. So, guys, you can't see the move, but basically it's sort of like an uppercut with my front hand, but you do almost a 360 twist of your hand. And it can go under people's guards, right? And he said, he said to the master, because the master caught him with it, right? They were sparring a little bit, and the master caught him with it. Or I don't know if they were sparring, but he was like, that looks interesting, works. He's like, how long did it take you to master that move? He said, I had to practice this every single day to get it first, not to master it in sparring, but to get it. He said, I had to practice this every single day for like 10 years because it's so unnatural body movement. Mm-hmm. It's unnatural body movement. Let me repeat that. Unnatural body movement. So it's not searching for efficiency. And if you look at Kung Fu, a lot of Kung Fu, it depends on the style, but a lot of them are based on like, okay, tiger style, animal style. Mm-hmm. They get inspiration from the animal world rather than the human world.
Right.
Gorillas don't jab and bob and weave. Now, not to say that some martial art moves are universal in mammals. Like I actually saw a kangaroo choke out another kangaroo with a rear naked choke. Like that's I'll send the video. It's pretty crazy. But so there's some universality between mammals or marsupials or whatever. But at the same time, this is not a natural movement. And he's training his body, this martial artist is training his body to do a non-natural movement and make it functional. Mm-hmm. Why not just do a regular uppercut, which takes about, like I said, 5 minutes to learn. Now, a lifetime to master, sure, but 5 minutes to learn. But the other move is not efficient. It is against your entire body movement. And the master supposedly has all these like pains in his elbow and this and that. And it's just not an efficient move. It's not, why do you spend, 10 years mastering this weird body movement when you could just do something else more efficient? Mm-hmm. The same thing is, and, do you ever heard of the movie, Iron and Silk? It came out in the 80s.
I think I've heard of it.
It's actually kind of a cool movie. It's this white guy goes to China, learns Kung Fu, everything, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Cool story. But he's actual real guy. And his master in the movie is a real guy. And his master, this style was to smash. The first thing you do, the very first day of your style, is you smash your hand against a rock and you break all the bones in your knuckle.
All right.
Then you reset it as like a natural brass knuckle.
Ugh.
Now, you have a club that you have brass knuckles now, basically.
Well, can you tie your own shoes anymore?
No, you can't. Exactly right. The amount, you can't use your hands anymore. Yeah. So that it could be effective. Could be effective. I could cut my wrist off and replace it with 2 hammers. Like Evil Dead, like the chainsaw, right? Yeah, chainsaw, right? I could do that. Is it effective? It could be, but it is not efficient. And a lot of traditional martial arts, because they were in that performance world, in the kata world, and not testing every single day like the MMA world, they also miss the search for efficiency. They miss it. And the same with the combative world we were talking about last podcast. And the most important thing, the thing that I love about MMA the most, is that it dispenses with everything, and it says, what is the most efficient way to destroy or deconstruct another human being? And that's it. That's it. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, like you said, there's these weird rules, that referee stoppage, mm-hmm, or, stand-ups, blah. But at the end of the day, it's still pretty much that. Yeah. Now, I do prefer the old rules where it's just like 2 man in, 1 man out. Everything goes, fine. I love that.
Right.
But even MMA with these rules is still more towards that than the artificial worlds that we had in the 80s, or, these other worlds that were focused on, like I said, performance or any of these other cultural signifiers. And we also, even 1,000 years ago, we had, an orientation in the Asian martial arts, but probably not even just the Asian martial arts, other martial arts, where it was like, well, you're not fighting every day. And you're certainly not fighting hand to hand every day. So you do these tricks. And actually, the word for technique in Japanese is waza, which is also kind of like a word for trick. Right? And that's the way it was translated. It wasn't like, oh, this is this cool technique. It was like, here's this trick. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't systematic, and it wasn't necessarily efficient. It was just a trick. And that trick, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but it's not, who knows if it's efficient. And one of the most influential guys in the martial arts was Jigoro Kano, the founder of judo. And from judo came Russian sambo. From Russian sambo came, from judo came Brazilian jiu-jitsu. All these arts. And the key function that these arts have, the same with boxing, even though it's not from that tradition, but the key thing they have is like, we will always focus on maximum efficiency. maximum efficiency, and efficiency in this combative realm. And MMA looks for the efficiency in throwing, it looks for the efficiency in striking, and it looks for the efficiency in submissions. And it doesn't matter what style you come from. It doesn't matter anything. None of that matters. You're not performing to anyone. Mm-hmm. You're not performing to the crowd. I mean, obviously, to some extent, you are after the fight, to sell tickets and stuff. But in the fight itself, it's less performance and more just get the job done. Mm-hmm. And that's really important. And this is why MMA is the most important development.
Wow.
In the fighting world, unarmed, ever. Mm-hmm. There's more development in the last 20 years because we got away from all that other kata crap and those weird, mean cultural signifiers. All that is all gone. It's like, put up or shut up. Can you fight? And that is a great thing. Now, some traditional martial arts may not like the MMA world, but you cannot deny its effectiveness. You cannot deny its effectiveness and its efficiency. It's efficiency. And hopefully Daniel Cormier will grow to be more efficient in the striking like he is in the grappling and the takedown era.
Wow.
Anyway, that's my take on that and how I was inspired by the Olympics.
Very interesting. I am excited to see where we are 20 years from now.
If
there's been such advancements and changes in the last 20 years, what's going to happen in the next?
I'm so glad you said that because that is absolutely true. Like, it's evolving constantly, and you're like, wait, what we knew 5 years ago is outdated, and what's it going to be in 10, 20 years? It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. John Jones, stop doing drugs. We need you to advance the sport.
No, it's funny because I hate him, his character, what he does outside, but I steal his stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. I steal it. I'm like, that is great.
Just don't steal his stuff because he gets territorial. No. Sorry.
Well, I wait till he hits people with their car and runs away from it. And
you just go back and grab it. Yeah. That's the way to do it when he's not looking. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you, Coach Rene, for coming by and sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
I hope you weren't too bored, Matt.
Never bored.
See, so guys, engaged. I have to tell you something. Last week, we were talking about combatives, and I saw Matt's eyes droop and get really tired. I'm like, shoot, I better wrap this up because he's getting.
I just get tired.
No, I think I bored you. I think I bored you. You want to talk about the Ultimate Fighter type, the fun stuff. You're like, I don't want to talk about this detailed discussion.
Let's talk about the fun stuff now. I want to give a shout out and a thank you to one of our biggest fans on Instagram right now, Anthony Pettis. Showtime. Thanks for liking all our stuff on Instagram. Come on the show, man. If you're listening. You are listening. I know you're listening. Come on the show.
And Anthony Pettis and his brother Sergio, two guys who are melding the efficiencies that Taekwondo does have with the efficiencies of Muay Thai and the efficiencies of Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling. They're did you see, the one he kicked off the wall and he kicked
Yeah.
I mean, that is unbelievable.
We got a lot to talk about, guys. Come on in here.
Yeah. Amazing guy.
Bring your knowledge. I know you're going to be in the city in a couple months at the fight in Brooklyn. So come and check it out.
Yeah.
Thanks
to meet him.
Thanks to everybody who's listening and sharing and liking the show. Make sure you rate us on iTunes and tell your friends. And we'll see you same bat time, same bat channel next week. Thanks for listening, guys.